Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with you, man. Great, beautiful Thursday morning over here in the Mississippi Delta, deep in the bowels of the undisclosed location, the Cherry Farm outside of Memphis. Crop dusters, man, if you hear any background noise, just they're hitting 40, 50 feet above the roof this morning. Those guys are some damn good pilots. Frank Duffy is standing by live up in Omaha, Nebraska, home of a lot of steaks and great baseball. We'll be joined here in just a couple of minutes, too. I'm going to bring in with us this morning Jake Wimberly, ESPN 105.9, the afternoon drive down in the bold new city, Jackson, Mississippi, kind of the tertiary capital of eastern Louisiana. It's kind of funny how the state of Mississippi goes. As you know, if you live in Jackson or south of there, you look toward New Orleans or Baton Rouge as your big city. North of that, they look toward Memphis. It's just a weird world we live in. But Jake Wimberly will be on with us. He is a baseball junkie, Frank. You're going to love him. Mississippi State guy, civil engineer. Let's just say that he and Maury together could solve most of the world's problems before midnight. All right. Gary Harris in the dental chair right now down in Tuscaloosa. He texted me and said, I should be okay. So he should be joining us from Tide 100.9 and WVUA TV3. He does a great show, Frank. And Bama fan or not, it's worth watching. WVUA TV 23, they're on there on Tuesday nights at 6:30 p.m. It's called Tider Insider TV with Rodney Orr and Gary Harris. Great show. Watched it the other night. And our number 2 will be joined by John Hartwell, AD at ULM. He texted me this morning, what a wild job you have as an athletic director. You got a lot going on. And Jordan Hill, check in with us in the fourth segment. 24/7 Sports covers the Georgia want-to-be three-peat Bulldogs. So follow us on Twitter at Sidelines_live, 50 hours a month, 25 shows at least a month, Monday through Saturday morning, 8 to 10 a.m. Central, www.sidelines.live. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Dollar goes a long way. Hey, let's embrace capitalism. Let's do the right thing. And Frank, I'm just curious because Jake texted me this morning and said, you know what I miss about the World Series this year is this guy. What? I mean, has anybody seen the guy up there? I mean, there's now on YouTube. There's like Vandy Whistler punched and everything.
Let me tell you, the Vandy Whistler shows up at one of these LSU games. He's going to find himself in a crab trap outside of Zalman, Louisiana. That's all I'm telling you. You will never hear or see from him again. I promise you.
Yeah, he'll end up on what do they call it on the History Channel? Swamp Mysteries. Jake Wimberly. Now you've probably seen the Vandy Whistler in Starkville at Duty Noble Stadium before. Have you met this guy? I just got to get this off my chest because Frank has invited him to come to New Orleans and visit some. I mean, what is it? I don't know how to whistle like that, but I love baseball. And I know there are people that sometimes do it, but have you ever met him, Jake, or had him on your show?
I never have. We've never talked to him. He's been in Starkville, I'm sure. I don't remember exactly when. But it's interesting for me, the Vandy Whistler doesn't bother me. I guess it's just because Mississippi State and cowbells, you just hear a lot of noise. So it's just kind of that, ambient noise, but I know he annoys a lot of people.
Yeah. He's
especially the announcers, the baseball, when they're producing the show, I've heard, because again, my good buddy Scott Alexander with Fox said somebody like that, like right near where the announcers' microphones are, because they're open air.
Yeah.
I mean, they would send down the Pinkertons to go escort him out. I don't know how he does it. And look, I can whistle. I can whistle with the best of them.
I know.
But you know what?
It's the LSU Whistler.
But you know what? Because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something.
Correct. Frank, I got to tell you, I told you Jake is a civil engineer. Mississippi State's got a great engineering and architecture program. Now he got that great honors college. But Jake does a show in Jackson every day, and I met him through our friend Chuck Oliver. Jake, Chuck, and Frank and Dan Matthews. That's how I got to know. I got to know Frank through my roommate Billy Roberts at Auburn, and then I knew Chuck when I was at Auburn. He was a freshman when I was a senior, and then I met Dan Matthews. But the great folks over there in Atlanta. So Frank is aboard Bengal 1 up in Omaha all this week, enjoying the College World Series. And Frank, I read your text last night. I know that feeling because I feel that all the time. Like, how much longer can these games last? And by the way, I listened to something really cool last night. I talked about those open mics, Jake and Frank. The someone in the Tennessee LSU game the night before, and they were saying, "We want to apologize. We have open mics up here in the booth," and I don't think that guy was too happy after he struck out. So it's kind of a crazy thing.
I think it was Paul Skeens that had the microphone on. They must have been interviewing him, and he caught a tirade of obscenities that I think is somewhere hovering around Omaha in the ether as we
exactly.
And look, let me tell you something. It's a good thing I didn't have a microphone when we popped up that bunt with men on first and second and no outs. Looking at the insurance run late, or I'd have been on ESPN. So you have to be careful around with open mic.
It is. Jake, you've been watching this. You are I don't know if baseball is your favorite sport, if it's football or whatever. But by the way, Frank, he does Matrix, incredible stuff on college football rankings and everything like that. But Jake, let's get your thoughts on the College World Series and the state of SEC baseball. And by the way, if you think we dominate in everything right now, Auburn just, I think, won the national championship in the bass fishing team. So life is good when you're in the South, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It is. And obviously football is where we live and breathe, but of course love baseball as well. And SEC baseball has been fantastic, for a long time. And, here in the state of Mississippi, the last 2 years, obviously what Mississippi State and Ole Miss did. And now, of course, looking with an all SEC final with LSU in Florida. And look, you look at it next year, you're just only going to get tougher bringing Oklahoma in, who, played for a national championship last year. You got Texas and the history of their baseball program. So, you can make an argument that pound for pound, the SEC is stronger in baseball top to bottom than they are even in football. But it's been a fantastic College World Series, and just to watch these guys continue to, evolve. And baseball players now are just built differently like football players are. And LSU, Frank, as you probably know this, came into the state of Mississippi, got a commitment from, a young man here at Jackson Prep. The Griffin kid here in Jackson, rated the number 1 player in the country for the class of 2024, 2025. So LSU baseball and Florida baseball right now, everything is working right for those two.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you putting us in the final already. We got one more task to do. We got to beat Wake Forest. I don't want to be blamed by my fellow Tigers for thinking that we're already in. So I got you already there. Yeah, I don't want to throw that on me, but I will tell you, I do feel pretty good with Skeeter going tonight. If Skeens is on 5 days rest, so that's what the discussion was when we were leaving last night. We were reminding all the Wake Forest people, y'all have a good night's sleep. Y'all gonna see the best player in college baseball tomorrow. Y'all get ready. But no, you're right, Jake. Right now, having Coach Butch Thompson on yesterday with us talking Auburn baseball. From top to bottom. Look, Vanderbilt, even with the Whistler, everybody in the SEC, South Carolina, A&M, Arkansas, you just have this incredible wealth of talent playing college baseball in the SEC, and the passion that these fan bases have. Look at Plainsman Park that's about to go in. We were talking about that yesterday and how beautiful that's going to be. So, the baseball is alive and well all over the country right now, especially during the time of the College World Series. But it really is a hot topic and a big fan favorite right now in the SEC, like it's been for many of our schools. But it seems like from top to bottom, it really is on everybody's mind and everybody's hearts in the SEC.
Yeah, and Jake, you're the first person I've heard say that. I think you're right. In fact, I know you're right. Top to bottom, the SEC is stronger in baseball than it is in football. That's a great That's a great way of looking at it, and trying to argue that with football.
Oh, no, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you even look here in the state of Mississippi. I mean, right now we're talking daily on my show, obviously football recruiting and what teams are going to do inside the Southeastern Conference around the country. But, here this week, baseball has been again, outside the College World Series, a big topic on our show. When you look at Dakota Jordan from Mississippi State, who went into the transfer portal and then came back to Mississippi State yesterday. Yeah. Chris Lamona's finding a new pitching coach. What's Mike Bianco going to do? We talk more baseball than we even do basketball. And who would have thought that you would have ever seen that in the SEC, 20 years ago? And the SEC basketball league is extremely it's much better than it has been in a number of years.
Yeah.
But baseball gets talked about definitely second to football in this state for sure.
Yeah.
You Braves or Cardinals, Jake?
Actually, you're going to find this crazy. If I had to pick between the two, it would be the Braves because obviously we've got the AA affiliate here, the Mississippi Braves. But I'm actually an old New York Mets fan. And the reason being is because years ago in Jackson, we had the Jackson Mets. Darryl Strawberry was on that team when I was a kid. Dwight Gooden, a lot of big baseball players. So grew up watching, a lot of the farm league New York Mets teams. Right here in Jackson, but if I had to pick between the two, I would go Atlanta Braves. Plus Ben Ingram, a good friend of mine, is the play-by-play radio voice for the Atlanta Braves.
He is. And we talked about him yesterday with Butch Thompson, and I've got the 680 app on my phone, and Ben Ingram's just got one of the Ernie Johnson and Skip Carey and the TV and the radio combination, but Ben is. And I've never met him. I don't know what he looks like.
Great guy.
He's probably great on TV, but he's awesome on the radio. He has the best voice. And I'm talking about, I've grown up, I'm an AM radio junkie. AM 1120, KMOX. Jack Buck, Mike Shannon here, open up a cold Anheuser-Busch product, St. Louis Cardinals. But Jake, would you agree? Baseball is the greatest sport in the world to listen to on the radio, and even better to attend in person. And if you're there in person, to have it on the radio and a cold beer and a Frankfurter hot dog, whatever you want to call it, how much better can life get?
Oh, no, I agree with you. And, I can remember being in the, being in college at Mississippi State in the late 90s. And, you didn't have all these games on TV. And Ron Polk would have a team in a regional or a super regional, or at that time, not a super regional, but a regional. And you were living and dying by every pitch of Jim Ellis on the radio. And you talk about Ben Ingram, super guy. Ben actually comes back and, because we have the radio rights to the Mississippi High School Athletic Association, all their championships. And
he does a lot of that.
He comes back and works with us in the fall, and he calls championship games with me and our staff here. So he still comes back home. And as good as he is on radio, he's an even better person. Super guy.
Wait. I got to tell you Ben Ingram's story. So this is the honest guy's truth. So as you know, Chuck Oliver has been our longtime endorser with Duffy Realty. My wife and I have Duffy Realty in Atlanta. And Chuck has been an endorser. We've actually sold 3 houses for him and helped him and Christian buy 2 houses, right? So we have this long-term, relationship, business and friendship with Chuck. Well, about 7 or 8 years ago, when we decided that we were about to start advertising on the Braves, we've been a Braves sponsor at Duffy Realty for all those years, being at 680 The Fan and then becoming the flagship, right? Well, so here comes this young announcer over from Mississippi, and he's doing the pregame and the postgame. And I was like, man, that guy's got the voice, the pipes of God. I said, he is an incredible announcer. And I went over, I met Ben, our account rep got me to introduce me to Ben. And so this was, I think, probably the year before we were going to go and do the Braves. And what sold me on the Braves was when they brought up Ronald Acuna. I said, I'm buying Braves packages. So I've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years now. And when I met Ben, I joked with him. I said, hey, we'd like for you, even though Chuck's our overall endorser on the station, if we do Braves, advertising, I want you to be our voice, our endorser. Oh, that'd be great. I'd like to do that. And he goes, so what is your fee? What is your talent fee? And he told me the number, and I said, no, that won't do. I said, we're going to increase it by 50%, but I want the rights to have you be my endorser the whole way through, however long you with the Braves. And we did the deal, and I said, that was the best deal I ever did, because he was taken aback that I was paying more money. But I knew he was going to be the play-by-play guy before it was all over with.
Yeah.
Dang if he didn't. And by the way, it was so cool. Jake, I don't know if you knew this. Of course, I've told everybody in the free world because I'm so damn proud of it. But I was actually the PA announcer for the Detroit Tigers for spring training. Don't let the Jello shot infused sore throat that I got here in Omaha, give you any indication of what I'm like on the mic. But it was so cool. So I got the gig in Lakeland, Florida this year for all 16 games. And I got to call not only the Atlanta lineup when they came in to play us, but I was able to invite, Ben and Jay Chad, who's the producer for the Braves broadcast, and Peter Moylan, who happened to be on for Joe that day, for that road trip, up to the booth, and I got to host them. And so it was so funny. Here it is, the advertiser who had the announcer is now in his moonlight gig, an announcer inviting his endorser into the booth. It was so cool.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic.
So cool.
Yeah.
Jake, that kind of stuff happens to you every day. Someone wants to increase your pay. Usually it's like, well, what can we get away with?
That's right.
I mean, look, you know what? Cost is only an issue in the absence of any added value. And that is,
right.
that is
And
the
that
best
was
bit
the
of advice
value.
I've given in training. And it's like, if you don't think, Jake, you got a great show, and there are other shows out there, and if you don't believe your show is the best, and I don't believe my show is the best, and what are we getting out of bed in the morning for? All right, college football, it's upon us. But right now it's baseball. So you say throughout the year, I want to ask you this, Jake, because go local, eat local, buy local. When I want to know what's going on in Mississippi with Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and I talked to Yancey Porter and I talked to you, you really know Mississippi State. You're a Mississippi State alum. And by the way, boy, did we miss out on a treat. Jack Crystal doing Mississippi State baseball with John Carrero and Jim Ellis. Could you imagine Jack Crystal doing baseball? There would have I don't think we'd ever heard of Harry Carey. I'll just leave it at that, because could you imagine him doing baseball? But throughout the year, that part of Mississippi, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Southern Miss. Southern had a really good run this year in baseball. And I mean, is it in high school baseball? Talk about the quality of it in the state.
Oh, the quality is I think top to bottom, you can match it with anybody in the country. And I mean that. I'm not just saying it because I live here. I mean, we've got, I've got a son that plays travel baseball. I know a lot of these travel baseball coaches were around these fields all spring and summer. And, some of the quality is really, really good. And when you kind of look top to bottom, even at the high school ranks, I mean, we just called the, 1 through 6A championships here at Trustmark Park where the Atlanta or Mississippi Braves play. Saw some fantastic talent, guys that were committed to a lot of SEC schools, a lot of SEC flavor. So, yeah, I mean, top to bottom, I mean, it is fantastic. And you talk about the state of Mississippi, not just Mississippi State and Ole Miss. I was going to say junior college, Delta State, even Jackson State and some of the SWAC schools have had some big years as well. So top to bottom, I would put up against anybody.
No, Frank, I don't know if you know this, but Jake knows it because he's a Mississippi guy. And I know it because I'm from Memphis, which is in the Delta. But do you know what the nickname of Delta State University is?
The Devils, isn't it?
Oh, blasphemy. One more strike. You get three. You get 3 10. What? Come on. Think about the Mississippi Delta. It's the Fighting Okra.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. I mean, they've got their T-shirts. They got an okra, a piece of okra, and he's got his hands. I mean, God, I love it. Jake, what's cool? And you mentioned about junior colleges. There's 17 junior colleges in Mississippi. That's more than anybody else in the country. Kansas has some, Texas has some, but Mississippi's the center of the universe for college baseball. It has been the last 2 years. This year, it's going to be Florida, Louisiana. It's going to be North Carolina. Frank, I'm telling you, man, LSU stays in this thing. You got to be able to survive all the way to Monday. That voice, can you do any voice throat exercise like Luciano Pavarotti before the opera?
Let me tell you, all I'm telling y'all is that we left Atlanta to come out west with the thought of going to Colorado State for about 4 days, to Colorado State, Colorado Springs, where Colorado State is, up to Denver for a few days. And then the goal was, Jake, we were going to go up to Yellowstone because I've been there, but Rhonda hadn't. So, but I told her, I said, I was very clear. LSU gets through this regional and this super regional. This big old bus behind me with the big old purple and gold stripes on it, this baby's turning east. And she was cool with it. But I did have the discussion with her this morning when she woke up, not in her own home in her bed with our spa bathtub at home. She goes, you do realize this is day 22 of this excursion out west. And so, and she goes, and by the way, Jake, here's the crazy thing. As nuts as I've been about LSU sports and baseball all those years, all the Skip Bertman years, all through the 90s, that and having Maneri win in 2009, all of that love. I've never had the ability to come out to Omaha. The schedules didn't align. Kids were doing swimming, or there were projects. There was something always going on, and I never could make it out here. Well, I told Rhonda, I said, I'm out in Colorado. I'm telling you, Tigers get in this. I will crawl to Omaha. And she goes, all right, sounds good, baby. Bucket list. Well, the bucket list comment, the shelf life on that is like about 8 days after you've made a trout sauce pecan and it's been left out for long. She goes, they better win. They better win, because I'm telling you what, we've been here. She joked with me. She goes, I think there's bills we got to pay. I said, we'll worry about that when we get back. That can sit in the mail. We'll get back to it sooner or later. But it's exciting. Every night, LSU now has won 2 nights in a row on, loser go home. And now we have the ultimate loser leave town game tonight with the number 1 ranked team in America, with the other number 1 ranked team in America for, most of the year. And you got the best pitcher in baseball Jay hasn't said who's starting. I don't think you need a crystal ball and a mensa meeting to figure out who in the hell's going to be on the bump for the Tigers tonight. Skeeter's going up there, and good luck, Wake. You can hit him. And the cool thing about it was we were talking with Coach Butch yesterday, and we were Jake, we were kind of having a chess question, do you give up your bishop to take a rook? And we were thinking, well, what if they bring you back on 4 days rest and pitch him last night? And then you can maybe have him come back on 4 days rest on Monday night. And I asked Butch, I said, has that ever been happened? Has that ever been done? And he goes, I don't think so. I mean, that would be rare. So we rolled the dice last night, had an incredible outing by a freshman. Herring came in, pitched 4 1/3 innings, scoreless ball, got us out of the jam when we were down 2-0. Then, Kay Peloso hit that bomb. I was more nervous in the Tennessee game, honestly, than I was last night, to be quite honest with you.
Jake.
So, we'll see tonight, but, all you want is a puncher's chance if you get into the final. And look, Florida's playing on all cylinders. They're playing really well. And to think that they were down on the ropes in that first game, only to come back with those 2 late bombs. It's going to make for one hell of a weekend, but we got to get through tonight first.
Yeah, Jake, all that being said, I can think of some things worse than an 8-day-old trout pecan. I could think of season tickets next to the Vandy Whistler. Not just say that, but what about all that, Jake? That's a lot to unpack.
You could be a Texas A&M big donor last season.
Yes.
that would have been worse.
You could be J.R. Ewing at the A&M Board of Regents meeting. Well, I say, what are we going to do, boys? Jake, what do you think?
No, look, that's fantastic, Frank, and I'm glad you guys are able to do that. Because it's tough. It's tough to get away. It's tough to get up there. That's a hard trip to make. But hey, look, LSU's playing really good baseball. I like LSU tonight to win. That's why I was, kidding, but not. I think it's going to be Florida and LSU. I just don't think that Wake has seen anything like what they're going to see tonight on the mound and on the bump. And they may actually win the game, but we'll see. It ought to be really fun. But that's what makes college baseball so fun. And right now, again, you've got a high drama situation going on tonight, and then a great weekend of a series that should, likely go into Monday.
Yeah. Jake, got a couple of questions here coming in from some listeners. One from over down in Moss Point, Mississippi. It said, Mississippi State used to make a living. They signed 37 players over a period of years way back from Moss Point that went to Starkville. What's happening with Mississippi State recruiting?
Mississippi State.
It wasn't meaning good or bad, just what's going on. Yeah.
Football. They've had
football.
Yeah, they've had a really good week this week. Picked up the top 2 wide receivers in the state of Mississippi. Also picked up another defensive lineman. They're at 13 recruits now on the cycle, depending on the outlet that you look at, 247 or on 3. They're sitting around 25, 26 in the country. So it's a really good week for Mississippi State. This has been a good start to the summer. Had a visit with Steve Robertson on this yesterday, and they expect to sign a couple more of this, or at least get committed to a couple more. It's interesting. The listener brings up Moss Point. Mississippi State did go into Moss Point for a long time. Kevin Fant played down there. Yeah. And was quarterback at Mississippi State back in the early 2000s. But, it's interesting, the Mississippi Gulf Coast. We talk a lot about this in our high school football coverages. After Katrina hit, and obviously it devastated the Mississippi Gulf Coast, a lot of those guys and families down there kind of scattered. And especially in the biggest classification, 6A and now 7A in the state of Mississippi, the Mississippi Gulf Coast has had a hard time. Now, Picayune, a 5A/6A school coming up this year, they've had some really big talent. They've got a running back that is going to be playing at Oregon this year. Another one committed to Stanford. Florida goes in there and picks up a big defensive lineman. So, the Mississippi Gulf Coast getting back to where it used to be, I think, as far as talent. But Mississippi State has had a really good run this week, and you got to tip the hat to Zach Arnett and to wide receiver coach Chad Bumpus as well this week.
Yeah, another question from a listener, John Paul Jones, Kosciuszko, Mississippi. The Hump has always been a tough place for opposing teams in basketball, but isn't it time that we build a new arena? Build that arena now, Mr. Gorbachev, says John Paul Jones in Kosciuszko. You know what Kosciuszko, Mississippi is named after? Either one of y'all know? If you can answer, I'll buy you a steamer pack of crystals and a 30 rack of Ham's beer at media days.
I know their high school team's called the Whippets, so I don't know if it has anything to do with that.
Well, General Kosciuszko was a Polish general who aided America in the War for Independence, along with General Lafayette from France. And General Kosciuszko was from Poland, hence Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Remember, it's only 2 syllables. Mississippi. It ain't Mississippi. I learned how to spell Mississippi, Jake, as a kid. I used to go to the cheerleading camp and watch the Ole Miss cheerleaders and all the SEC cheerleaders. And I wasn't dumb, and it was fun. But they would say, Ole Miss cheerleaders.
Let me just tell you, I can help you with the pronunciations on the other side of the Pearl River.
Yeah,
I can't help you on that side.
But it's Mississippi. You know how they did? They had a cheer at Ole Miss that goes MISSISSIPPI. That's how I learned how to spell Mississippi. Right. So when someone says, "Can you spell Mississippi in a spelling bee?" MISSISSIPPI. But anyway, Jake, let's talk about the Hump and are they going to do anything new? Because Jake. Frank, if you haven't been to Starkville, and I've been down there a lot, I've been to 37 football games over the years there. That is a cool campus. Their facilities, it started with Leo Seal, Jake, and then it started with Jake Wimberly Foundation. It's incredible.
I got permanent ear loss from all them damn cowbells how many times I've been there.
I love them.
And look, I'll tell you, I think Orlando Lundy is still scoring points on us. Still running around on that field from 1986. I remember extremely well. and Dana Moore kicking like a field goal that was 95 yards long to beat us in 1982 to send us off right after we beat Florida State to get into the Orange Bowl. We went in and had to play Mississippi State, and they were tough as a $3 steak that day. And Dana Moore hit that long field goal. I remember. I know Starkville very well.
Yeah,
and baseball too.
It's a cool place, Jake. But what about the Hump?
Well, when you look at the Hump, and you're right, Rob. There's a lot of renovations, a lot of things going on. Of course, things they've done at Scott Field. You look at Duty Noble Field. I know there's some new renovations that they've done at the Hump. I know they're doing some more renovations. I don't know, and I haven't heard, and it could be on the docket, shall we say, in the future. To build a new basketball arena, but I think what they're doing right now is just trying to retrofit what they've got. It's still a really good arena. They've done a really good job with improvements, and you look at what the basketball program was able to do this past year. This should be a pretty darn good year, and one of the more exciting. It's hard to believe that when you say where's the fan base excitement at. Obviously, football is always excited. That basketball is a little more than baseball right now in Starkville, and that's a change of the guard.
And Jake, There's nothing like sitting on the back of a tailgate and watching Mississippi State and Rafael Palmeiro and Will the Thrill Clark playing against Joey Bell and LSU in the mid-'80s, sitting out there with a couple of long, tall necks of Dixie beer and watching Mississippi State and LSU from a tailgate in the outfield. That was awesome.
Yeah,
you're right.
Jake, real quick before you go, I know you got to go, Jake, but Gary Harris is checking in with us right now. Gary's over in Tuscaloosa, and Gary, I watched Tider Insider TV. Gary is WVUA TV 23, Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa. It's Jake Wimberly, ESPN 105.9, Afternoon Drive in Jackson, Mississippi, and then of course Frank Duffy up in Omaha, Mr. LSU Tiger. But I watched you and Rodney. And I loved what you said. You said, I'm going to miss that Mississippi State series because he's the sports anchor and sports talk show host there in Tuscaloosa. We're losing some of those rivalries, and Jake's a Mississippi State guy. I hate that. And Gary, just wanted to get you – now, Jake's a Mississippi State guy, covers them closely, but we're going to lose some of these what we call backyard neighborhood rivalries that were that close. They were just – it's the relationships really with the people, Gary, that you probably know over there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Rob, as you know, I worked in Mississippi, WTOK in Meridian for 6 years, and for Michael Rubenstein down in Jackson. So I've spent a lot of time in that state. And, of course, now covering Alabama for more than 20 years. It is one of those games that, when you talk about the great rivalries in the SEC and, Auburn, Alabama, and Georgia, Florida, and, you go on and on and on, LSU, Ole Miss, nobody ever mentions Alabama and Mississippi State. And, for one thing, for the most part, it's been a one-sided series. Obviously, Jackie Sherrill had quite a bit of success against his alma mater, but for the most part, Alabama's dominated, but they played every year since 1947. And because of the logistics and the geography, it's just, it's a fun game. I mean, it's just, you jump on Highway 82 here in Tuscaloosa and you're in Starkville in, 75 minutes. Same thing for Mississippi State fans coming over here when it's in Tuscaloosa, and again, having lived in that state and worked in broadcasting in that state too, I know that for Mississippi State fans, it's just always obviously nothing trumps the Egg Bowl, but I would say in my experience there, spending nearly 10 years in Mississippi total, that Alabama game is probably the second biggest game on the schedule. And when Mississippi State did beat Alabama, and I experienced several of those wins, it was something special, something to hang your hat on. So I'm going to miss it. I've talked about this, Rob. I'm not naive.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to have 16 teams in this league, and then right now play 8 games, maybe eventually 9, and you're going to lose some traditional games. But Alabama has played Mississippi State more than it's played any other opponent in the history of the program. As I said, they've played every year since 1947. It's a rivalry, but it's not bitter. It's people get along, and I've just always enjoyed that game, and I've always loved when I was in Mississippi State covering games in Starkville. But since I've been in Tuscaloosa, I love going over there. Like I said, it's a quick trip for me. I love that stadium. I love the way you're treated. So I'm gonna miss that game, and I know it'll come around ever so often, but it won't be on a regular basis.
And Gary, to add to your point, can I say one thing from an LSU perspective? You're exactly right. Though you guys, y'all won games against them, you didn't win a lot. But I will tell you what you did. We almost always played Alabama after Mississippi State played them. When we were on that traditional calendar. Mm-hmm. And when I tell you, you guys were like the gritty, tough fighter that is the guy that goes in and spars with the champ and stays with him so that the next guy that comes along actually has a shot against him. So I'm telling you, all those years when Alabama would come out of that game against Mississippi State, and look, the one with what was it? I guess it was Tua. When Tua got wound up getting hurt, we wound up playing right after that.
All right.
So that's probably the biggest example. But Alabama would always come out of that game, and all Alabama coaches would always say it. Mississippi State, it was a dogfight, and we benefited by having to play in Alabama when they were beat up or even had injuries after that. So I'm just letting you know, you're exactly right. There was a lot of effect from that Alabama-Mississippi State rivalry, and we felt a lot of the repercussions in a positive way.
Yeah, and Jake, I know you got to tag out here, but I always remember the funny thing about the Mississippi State Alabama game. Coach Bryant would always say after an Alabama game, "What are you going to do, Coach, tonight?" John Forney would say, and he'd go, "Well, I think I'm going to go home and have dinner and sit there and listen to the Mississippi State game on the radio and eat an onion sandwich." Jake, you can have the onion sandwich, but I love having you on, Jake, because you genuinely love covering Mississippi. And Gary's right. If you ain't Mississippi, I love that state and people down there. But man, Mississippi State, when you play them, you're going to get the hell beat out of you. They've beaten Auburn 6 of the last 11 years, I might add, Jake. So it's not like y'all are good. But anyway, I know you got some things to say, but thanks for being on here with us. I love it.
Oh, absolutely. And Gary's right. That's a big rivalry. It's a fun rivalry. Now, I think Mississippi State fans in football are glad to be taking a break from Alabama, considering the lack of success over the last, since the Saban era basically started. But it's a fantastic ball game between the two, and a lot of memories between the two. And you're right. Oddly, Mississippi State a lot more success against Auburn, but it'll be fun to see the new SEC schedule come out next year. To get into that schedule and to see a lot more rotation and a lot more flavor on that on the SEC side.
Yeah. Hey, how do they follow you, Jake?
Say that again, Frank.
Yeah, Jake. Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
I was just gonna say, Jake, do me a favor when you're over there. Just double check and make sure John Bond doesn't have any more eligibility, because all 4 years that I was in college, he came over and beat the hell out of us. So just double check. Make sure you go to Academic Hall and make sure in the records he ain't got no more eligibility.
Yeah, Valdosta cannot produce any more great quarterbacks for a while. But Jake, how do people follow you and listen to your show every afternoon? And I'll come on anytime. I love it.
Yeah, appreciate you yesterday. Just on Twitter at Jake Wim. We're here, of course, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN Radio. We're in Central Mississippi. And, of course, you can find us on the FM dial. Stream it on thezone1059.com every day, 3 to 6.
All right, go local, listen local. Get the app on your phone, folks. We'll see you next week, Jake. Thanks.
Great talking to you, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Gary, we were talking about Mississippi, how you learned to spell Mississippi as a kid. Here comes one from Dave Cody out in Bellingham, Washington. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. But, Gary, I didn't know you had worked in Mississippi.
You didn't know that? Yeah,
I did not know. I did not. I thought you'd been in Tuscaloosa or in Anniston and Tuscaloosa or Birmingham.
I spent nearly, I guess, around 9 years total in Jackson and in Meridian. Yeah.
Okay.
And worked for the legendary Mike Rubenstein, who was, he was the guy as far as sportscasters in Mississippi in the 80s and 90s, and then spent WTOK, a very good station there. In Meridian I thought you knew that. Yeah, I spent quite a few years over there. Yeah.
Well, one thing, and Frank, I think we all appreciate this because we're about the same age. It's the local sports guys. I mean, that by the way, start watching that YouTube Tuesday nights, 6:30 p.m. Central, Tider Insider TV with Gary Harris, Rodney Orr, and like Rodney says, he goes, "I never know what we're going to talk about until I get there." Gary, you're great at directing traffic. You really are. And I tell you, y'all cover, you got into basketball, you cover baseball, you cover a lot. And I'm telling you what, man, it's hard to find local TV, but now you can go to YouTube. But I recommend everybody watch these shows, man. You want to know what's going on? Tap in the local.
Now, let me tell you something about my time in Mississippi. You and Frank both will enjoy this. When I worked for Rubenstein, he was a legend over there, but he had made his hay. He'd gone to Vanderbilt, but he loved the state of Mississippi. But he had made his hay as much covering the SWAC as he did the SEC in Southern Mississippi, and loved the SWAC. And so when I was working for him on a Saturday, I might be in Itta Bena or Lorman or somewhere in Louisiana as much as I might be in Starkville or Oxford or Hattiesburg. I mean, we covered the SWAC, and I saw some incredible football players. In fact, Steve McNair was in his heyday at Alcorn State, and we went down there one day and spent the entire day with him and got to spend a day with him on campus and so forth. What an incredible football player! But yeah, I can remember those SWAC games and the passion and the excitement and the bands and the pageantry. And I tell people, because obviously SEC football is the creme de la creme. We know that, but man, if you ever get an opportunity, and you and I've talked about this too, Rob. go watch a SWAC game. Go watch Jackson State play Grambling or any of these matchups, and you'll have a thrill. Or the Magic City Classic right over here between Alabama State and Alabama A&M. Man, that is some incredible. It's great football, but it is an event, and I love covering the SWAC.
The Bayou Classic in New Orleans between Southern and Grambling. Let me tell you something. That was the one game we would go in and watch in the Superdome, even as LSU people or Tulane people. We'd go in, and that was the only game that you would never get up out of your seat unless you absolutely had to, because even at halftime, the halftime show was worth the price of admission just to go into the game. Right?
There was the saying among some people in the SWAC that you went for the halftime and stayed for the game. Those halftime shows are unbelievable.
That's right.
Hey, Gary, as a small boy, I used to get up at 10 o'clock Sunday mornings, local TV in Memphis, the Eddie Robinson show from Grambling. And I met Eddie Robinson III at the Nick Saban Legacy Award dinner May 7th of 2022 at the club up on the mountain in Birmingham. And I said, I'd love to get you on the show sometime. So I'm going to do it. But his whole family was there to accept the award posthumously. God, they were incredible. Steve Spurrier, Steve Melnick were there. Of course, Nick Saban was there. And it was the two people up on the stage were Lauren Sisler from there in Birmingham and Rick Neuheisel, the soon-to-be maybe commissioner of college football. That would be nice. Or Gary, if you want to do it, or Frank. But anyway, I don't think I know it. Rick Neuheisel said, we were covering a game in Ruston at Louisiana Tech. And I said, you know what? I got some time before the game. He drove over to Grambling, which isn't but maybe 10 miles away. And when you go to those games, the fans of the SWAC have more fun probably than fans at any game, because win or lose, they're going to have an incredible halftime show. But Eddie Robinson, by the way, a little bit of trivia, over 200 players went to the NFL from Grambling.
Some of the greatest in the history of the game. Yeah. I loved a funny story. In fact, when Mississippi State played Texas in '91, and Jackie Sherrill had castrated the bull. Yeah, I got sent to Shreveport because Southern was playing in Shreveport. I want to say either against Alcorn or Jackson State. And so I didn't even get to cover the Mississippi State-Texas game, but had a good time going down there. But, hey, one other quick thing, too, in terms of, LSU guy, Alabama guy, Auburn guy, and kind of Mississippi State guy. We love the SEC, but I always encourage people, too, whether when I was in Jackson covering Mississippi College or here, just down the road, the University of West Alabama in Livingston, little small community Division II school. But if you ever want to see kind of get a feel for what football, these younger fans, what it was like, a long time ago, before every game was on TV and before the mega dollars involved, go to a Division II game, go to a small college game and just soak it all in. And people are there because they love those teams. Those communities are special. So big time football is great, but if you get a chance, whether it's of course SWAC, I consider big time football, but some little small Division II school maybe in your area, if your team's off that weekend, or if it's a night game on TV on the road and they play a day game, sneak out to one of these small college games and experience kind of football the way it used to be.
I agree. I totally, like Matt Dean and, John Hartwell will be on here in the next hour from ULM and Monroe. That's why I keep saying we've got to be careful. We need sports everywhere. They teach you, as Eddie Robinson said, football teaches you the lessons of life. You get knocked on the ground, get back up. You keep getting back up. But when you quit getting up, you're done. You're finished. So you got to get back up. And, you think about the respect that Coach Bryant had for Eddie Robinson. And you think about what sports have done, pulling people together. But Frank, what I love about Gary is he'll be out in Pickens County or Reform or Utah. That's EUTAW, not UTAH. They spell it right in Alabama. But Greene County with the track.
You follow?
But you follow. I was talking to Sean Thomas, one of my fraternity brothers from Eufaula last night down in Auburn. Great guy. Him and Tom Mildren from Clayton. But I think about that, Gary, covering those local, the high school. That's why, someone like you writing a coffee table book, my time behind the mic, and it isn't about just covering Alabama. That's the low hanging fruit and covering that, but it's the high schools and it's West Alabama. It's covering those games in the SWAC. And by the way, a little bit of trivia. I guarantee Gary knows it. But do you know, Frank, the name of the quarterback who threw all those passes to Jerry Rice in Archie McNeil's offense there at Alcorn State?
Wasn't it Willie Totten?
Willie World Be Free Totten.
Yeah, Satellite Totten. Yeah.
Satellite. Okay, I thought it was World Be Free.
No, Satellite Totten and Archie Cooley was the gunslinger. And when he went to Mississippi Valley, Mississippi Valley, not in the SWAC, they were bottom feeders. Yeah. But when he got Totten, and of course Rice, Rice wanted to play at Mississippi State, and they just didn't recruit him. And they lit it up. And I remember, and that was before I was in Mississippi, but then watching, Jerry Rice in the NFL and hearing the story about catching the bricks. His dad was a bricklayer. Oh, yeah. And, he had those huge hands anyway, but he toughened up his hands by catching bricks. And that football just stuck to his hands. But, the SWAC has produced some great players. But you mentioned the high school stuff. And the one thing I'm reminded about when I go to Gordo, I go to Reform, I go to Carrollton or Utah or any of these little communities is, I finished high school in Cleveland County, Alabama, a little small town in northeast Alabama in 1982. So 1981 was my last high school football season. But I'm reminded, here we are 40 plus years later, but when you go to one of these little communities on a Friday night, they got internet and, well, if you can get it to come through, but it's a time warp. It's still everything in those communities is still built around that high school football Friday night. And it's not a lot different. Yeah. And I went up, cover practice at Gordo last year after school. And I was reminded their kids were out sitting on the back of their pickups after school in the parking lot. And there's not a lot different. So when you think the world has moved on, go to these little communities and see how they rally around their high schools. And it's not a lot different than when I was in high school or you guys were in high school.
I love it. From the high school game, it migrates down to the Dairy Queen or the Sun.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, still not a lot to do in those little communities. But when Friday night comes around, boy, the town's shut down, and it's all about high school football.
Yes,
well,
sir.
I read someone sent me a great thing about when we were all coming up, for Christmas, you get a new over and under shotgun or a deer rifle or a 270, 308, and it's in your gun rack in your truck. You take it to school and you go to the principal and say, "Hey, Mr. Harris, come see my new gun I got for school." Woo, man, that is nice. You do that now. This is News 7. We've cornered off the entire National Guard has been deployed. SEAL Team 6 is on the scene. But Gary, that's what I love about it. Dr. Waller May and Guy May and the May Veterinary Clinic sponsor you and Rodney's Alabama Reports, and they love where they live. They're Auburn grads. 95% of their clients are Alabama people. It's about relationships that you have with people there, and that's what I love. And I'm telling you, YouTube is where you go back and you get local news. And I hate the fact that so much of the local time is squeezed out by this national stuff. And to borrow Buddy Martin's great line, you know what an expert is in today's world? Somebody that comes in from across the country that has an opinion. And they don't even know what they're talking about. But he's an expert because he's from New York City.
Well, we've been brainwashed, and again, there's a lot of really talented national analysts and sportscasters.
I'm kidding a lot.
But we've been brainwashed though to think that if somebody's on ESPN or they're on Fox Sports, that they know more. And oftentimes, when it comes to maybe the NFL or national topics, they do. But again, when you're talking about whether it's LSU or Alabama or Mississippi State, the people that cover those teams every day, that have their feet on the ground, that see those programs for what they really are, they know more. Now, are there some, a guy like Chris Lowe who covers the SEC for ESPN, now he's as connected as anybody, and he can come down and he can get in Saban's office, and he has access probably that the local guys don't have. But day to day, we're here, we see it all, every program, and you get better coverage if you focus on local and one of these ESPN pundits, when they're spouting off about something at LSU or at Auburn or Georgia, I kind of laugh sometimes because they have no clue. They have no idea. They read a quote from Saban, or they read a quote from Brian Kelly, or they read a quote from Hugh Freeze, and they run with that quote when they don't have any idea of the context or how it was said. And sometimes, especially with a guy like Saban, because of what he's done, anything he says, somebody's looking for, something to run with, whether it's the scheduling thing. I say this, and Frank knows this too. Alabama and Nick Saban, he may have I do think he's a big picture guy. Obviously, he's got a vested interest in Alabama. But people say he's scared to play somebody, I just laugh. I mean, he's not scared to play anybody. But he is, though, looking out for his school. And he's saying, if we got to play Alabama, Auburn, and Tennessee every year, and one of our rivals is playing Missouri, Vanderbilt, and maybe, somebody else, how's that fair? So you do have to look out for your school, and Saban does that. But I do think, it's like when he's asked that question several times, is this what we want football to be? Going back to the kick six game when people wrote him off and said he can't handle the RPOs, he can't handle the fastball offense. No, he just said, is this where we want the game to go? Because he preferred to line up and play 55, 60 plays in a phone booth and get the biggest, strongest guys and maul you. But when he saw that's where the game was going, he said, okay, I'll make the adjustment. He brought in Kiffin, and the rest is history. So
he absolutely adapted. He absolutely adapted.
We're going to go to a break here in about a minute. And Gary, it'll be about a 40-second break. If you can stay, great. I know you got your show coming up.
3 more minutes, and I get ready for
All right, because when we go before we go to the break, I want to say the things we miss are the personal stories. And I remember the times when Alabama came to Memphis. They were playing UCLA in the Liberty Bowl, 1976, Gary, and two of my friends, Clay Templeton and Rob Ruffin. And Rob was the biggest Alabama fan, still is, on the planet. And I'm talking, I know but his entire room was wallpapered in Alabama stuff. Mm-hmm. They sneak over there to practice one day on Grandview by the University of Memphis campus, and they sneak out on the field, and security runs over there. And this is a true story. Coach Bryant's up in the tower and says, hold on. He walks down, goes over, puts his arms around him, gives him a hug, takes a picture with him, and those guys didn't shower for a week because they touched him. But that's the kind of stuff that we got to.
And in the process, he had time to smoke 3 Chesterfields.
Well, that's the one when you hugged his neck. See, you got to wear the Chesterfield.
Hold that break. Hold that break. We're going to be right back.
Rob,
right back in 30 seconds. Okay.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Back, Frank, I know you got to get going because Rhonda's like day 22 of this saga in Omaha. But Gary,
that's right. That's right. Yeah, well, that's right. You got Frank's out there in Omaha, and I watched that LSU Wake Forest game, both games, and I'll tell you this. I think LSU's going to win. You got that pitcher going now, and I thought they should have. Yeah, I thought they should have won the first game. And I love Wake, man. That's a really good team. But I think we're going to have LSU Florida playing for it all. I do.
That will be a brawl and a half. I can tell you that. If we make it in again, and Florida's playing great ball right now. They're on cruise control. They got the high ground. They will only play 3 games when we will have played twice as many games.
Right.
So they'll be set up. So we got an uphill battle. When you get into that losers bracket, on that second game, man, it's a long row of hoe. But I will tell you, I do feel good about our chances tonight. They've never seen anything like what Skeens is throwing. It was really smart. Jay held him over for 5 days rest. We were talking about it yesterday on the show. Should he pitch him last night at four days rest or keep him? Did the right thing, rolled the dice, gamble played off. Now you got him tonight in the elimination game. Loser leaves town, and then we'll see what happens going forward. But all you want is a chance to get into that final series.
Yeah.
That's all that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with skiing, like you said, he's so good, and I'm with you. I mean, if you pitch him earlier than that,
Yeah.
And you use him up, you play Wake in this situation, you're not going to have him. Now you got it. I mean, there's no excuses. I mean, LSU's ready to go. Best team is going to win, and we're going to get a great series.
Be awesome.
Gary,
hey, Gary, I got to ask you. Gary,
Yeah.
I got to ask you one quick thing, though. We're talking about the high schools. Hey, look, I wouldn't be able to get my my clandestine check from Brian Kelly if I didn't kind of whisper in your ear, hey, any news on that quarterback situation over there? Has the tea leaves cleared up yet? Because I got to report back.
They're working like all these players are. They're working on their own right now, 7-on-7. I don't think this thing's going to be cleared up. I wouldn't be shocked if Saban, usually the depth chart comes out the week of the first game. I bet you he has 3 quarterbacks listed, so-and-so or so-and-so.
Yeah,
or
right
so-and-so.
across the same line. That's typical. That's typical Nick.
Yeah, so I don't think we're going to hear anything, until they play Middle Tennessee, and he may play 2 in that game. It'll probably be the Texas game that second week before we know for sure who the starter is. That's just my gut feeling.
Yeah. Gary, I know you got to go. You got a great show coming up today.
Real quick, Rob, I want to mention something on that Liberty Bowl game you mentioned, because I remember that game really well. I was 12 years old, so obviously, and I wasn't there, but I was a 3-loss Alabama team that year, right in the middle of Bryant's 100-win decade. 76, they had lost to Ole Miss, Georgia, and Notre Dame. And that was a 1-loss UCLA team. UCLA was favored in that game. And Alabama wore them out, 36-6. I think Barry Krause was a sophomore linebacker. He was the MVP in that game, had a pick 6. All right, I got to go.
You remember what happened? Alabama came out. It was 9 degrees, and Mr. Sam Bailey got field passes from my dad and my 2 sisters and me. We got to be on the field at that game. Wow. Alabama came out in cut-off jerseys with no sleeves, and it was 9 degrees, and the UCLA guys kind of got scared. And it was a Gordon Stolich. It was a curb stomp, and here comes Plowboy Frazier. Gary, tell them how they can follow you, and we'll do it again next week.
Yeah,
love having you on.
On Twitter, it's at Gary Harris _WVOA. TV website is WVOA23.com, and the radio station is Tide109.com. Thanks, guys.
You bet. Thank you. Gary Harris in Tuscaloosa, folks, and I'm going to tell y'all something. You got to love local. This is a comparison I'm going to make, Frank. And I'm not saying that the national guys are all bad, but, we grew up with ESPN, the sports reporters on Sunday morning, a bunch of big burly guys up there in New York from Boston and Philly and all that grew up playing stickball, okay, telling us about college football. There's some really good national guys. Now, Reese Davis from Hamilton, Alabama, went to Alabama. He understands the South. That's probably why he's the face of ESPN Game Day. But you've got to respect, like Gary said, the people that are fans of Alcorn State, of Southern, of, McNeese, ULM, University of Louisiana, it means just as much to them to win as it does to the fans of all the other schools, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, and look, no better example of the national guy coming down and thinking he knows more. Have you ever seen when the Braves are on like Sunday night and like Alex Rodriguez and, they're sitting in there and they're pontificating and, they're saying stuff that we Braves fans that watch every night, we're kind of like the RCA dog. Our heads like cocked, like, what did you just say? Because clearly those of us who know the team are around the team. Hell, I'm one of the dang sponsors of the Braves. I know more than the national team when they come down and they pontificate. So, no, you're exactly right, Rob. When you're talking, look, they might know more about all subjects, but they certainly don't know more about specific subjects. That's the beat writers and the beat reporters and the local radio sports guys. That's, like Jake and Gary, that actually know that area, know that team, talk about it every day. They know far more than the national press. Far more.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something interesting. And I learned this out at Fort Benning as a TV reporter for Channel 3. You want to know what's going on in the platoon or in the battalion or in the company? You don't ask an officer. You go ask a sergeant. It's not a sergeant major, as they say. It's a sergeant major, first sergeant, staff sergeant. The NCOs, they run the military. As my dad said, I graduated from Auburn March 18th, 1954. He was a KA at Auburn. Immediately took his oath. Second lieutenant, goes to Camp Stewart, Georgia, Hinesville, Georgia. He goes, it wasn't hell, boy, but you had a damn good view of it. And it's now Fort Stewart. But he said, I didn't know anything about being an officer. I learned everything from my first sergeant who'd been in the Army for years, had 3 or 4 kids. That's where you learn. And then again, it's not that the national guys are bad, but an example of Chris Lowe, as he mentioned, okay, and a policy on this show is we don't, say if someone's on here as a guest with us, we don't say something after they're on that we wouldn't have asked them to their face. But with Chris Lowe, and I like Chris Lowe. I don't know him, but I think he does damn good work. But I'll tell you this. He did a story recently on Brian Harsin, who should have his picture in post offices around the country for stealing $15 million from Auburn for dereliction of duty, and like he wasn't treated right. Let me tell you something. Reminds me of the Gulf War in August of 1990. All these young people that had signed up for ROTC and all of a sudden are being sent over there to Kuwait and Iraq. Well, I just did it for the college money. I didn't know I'd have to fight. Well, you should have read the contract, you dumbass. Okay. Here's the other thing. This is what people need to think about. I mean, you get what you sign up for. That's it's no easy way out there. You're not going to get anything for free except a pink slip and other diseases that we won't get into, but they take no effort. Okay, boils on your arse because you lay around that don't do anything. You know what America needs? We need Matt Dillon, U.S. Marshal. Okay, and Matt, you think about Matt Dillon, and John Hartwell is wrapping up a meeting right now. He'll be with us in a second. But think about Matt Dillon. I mean, he would just backhand you and smack you and just take your guns out of your holsters and go, "You're coming with me. You're going to jail." He didn't put up with anything. And then he had Festus. I'll take Festus over Chester any day. Chester, why didn't you just get rid of the leg and get you a wooden 2x4? I mean, dragging that leg around, I couldn't stand it. But Festus, Matthew, God doggy, Doc's going to get angry. Doc's always mad. What do you think? Doc was always pissed.
When we were growing up, that was must-watch TV. I remember
it still is,
PBS
by the way.
On Monday nights. I remember it like it was yesterday. And you know what I didn't realize when you were talking about it? I looked it up real quick. They wound up doing a TV movie in like 1984 and 85. They like kind of did a wrap up. They went off the air. I think it was like in like 77 or 78. And then they did like a wrap. I was like, I don't even remember it, but I was like, that's pretty cool. Seeing Sheriff Dillon running around as an old guy.
Marshal Dillon.
Great. Yeah.
Marshal Dillon was, and it lasted 20 years, 1955 to 1975, 648 episodes. The only thing close to it was Law and Order. That did a lot. Yeah. The average lifespan of a TV show nowadays is maybe 2 years, maybe 3, but they're not producing stuff. You go back and you look at the old television shows. There was no nudity, no cussing, no sex, no nothing. The writers were brilliant. Andy Griffith. Leave It to Beaver. You watch Green Acres. They were brilliant. They knew how to do it and stay in their lanes. Now it's so gross and crude and disgusting. Yeah. It's like Bill Bennett's book, The Death of Outrage. You lose people. There was something about the Tonight Show when Raquel Welch or Angie Dickinson would come out there. Ed McMahon would even sober up. No need for coffee. Just bring them sit next to Raquel Welch on the couch. I'll just leave it at that.
It would always come close to the line, but never go over the line.
Yes. And of course, in the pre-emasculated male culture that so many people are trying to push in America, nothing was better than Friday night being over at my grandmother's when my parents would drop us off so they could go out on the town. A Dean Martin roast.
Oh,
I mean, Foster Brooks roasting Don Rickles. I want to say that Mrs. Pickles, Don Rickles, and I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, Foster Brooks even drank a drop. That was just acting.
No, it was all an act. And by the way, Dean Martin was the same way. Dean Martin was never drunk on stage. That was apple juice. That was part of his persona. That was part of his thing. By the way, I love the line that Foster Brooks said to Rickles after he's slaying him. Like, Rickles is dying on that road.
Yeah.
And the last thing he says, he kind of wraps up, has a pregnant pause, and then he finally goes, "Oh, and by the way, you're out of scotch."
Yeah, he goes, "And by the way, you're out of scotch. I want to say Mrs. Pickles is a lovely lady." But hey, I got to tell you, man, that's the funny thing. Speaking of the pregnant pause among actors, who is the greatest pause actor? Audrey pointed this out to me. She's right. Who's the greatest pause actor we've ever seen? He was in a long-time series about outer space.
Shatner.
Yeah, William Shatner. Wasn't he? I mean, incredible.
Second, but he's annoying. Is that David Caruso guy that used to be on NYPD Blue and then Miami. You know, his pregnant pauses were like a Shatner was.
Yeah, the Whistler just wanted to come in. You said something about annoying. I just thought about the Vandy Whistler. keep going. I mean, there's something on YouTube I saw of the Vandy Whistler. Vandy Whistler gets punched. I mean, you can't make that stuff up, Frank. Now, did someone really? I mean, they can't pay him.
Somebody threatened. I want to say it was this. That at either tournament or maybe a couple of years before, I want to say it was an Ole Miss guy, finally walked down to that guy and said, "Look, dude, I've had enough. You whistle one more time, I'm going to lay you." Again, I don't want to speak out of school. And look, certainly wouldn't shock me if an LSU guy would have done it. I mean, we're only at 27,000 shots on the board. The shot board made the start of Sports Center last night. The tote board on how many shots. Look, it wouldn't shock me if one of ours did it, but I think an Ole Miss guy walked down there and literally, like, it's one of those guys that are not demonstrative. You know, the guy in the barroom fight, you don't have to worry about is the one that's doing the Fred Sanders. It's the guy that quietly takes off his watch because he doesn't want to hurt his watch because he's about to pummel you. So it was the Ole Miss guy going down. You do this one more time. You whispered it. Here, you know, that's the guy you got to take serious.
and again, I don't. There's two Vandy Whistlers. I think they have two now because they're afraid one of them, you know, may get put in a dang chokehold or something. But man, you're right. The TV producers, they call it photo bombing nowadays. But man, you're trying to listen to the game and you have to turn the sound off. And then if you try to listen, you know, you can be to where, you know, a lot of people when they watch a college football game, they say, well, I like to hear the radio, but I can't get it synced with the real time on TV. All you got to do if you've got DVR is pause your TV and let the radio catch up to it. Okay.
Yeah.
That I'm just, you know, that trade secret. No, that's how you do it. I believe me, I'm not Mr. IT, but Nigel, our web guy, is, and of course, Mildred and Petunia down in West Vance. So I'll say this. And great stuff, though, on the May Veterinary Clinic report from Gary Harris, Tide 100.9 and WVUA, Tuscaloosa Channel 23. I want to say, you know, you talk about going to the Southern Classic, going to these games. I'm with Gary. I like to go see any level of, you know, like Matt Dean says, you go over and watch a game at Rhodes College or West Alabama or Jack State over in, you know, Jacksonville, Alabama. Beautiful setting over there in the mountains. But it just makes you appreciate it. And I'm going to tell you, when I hear these kids with their hands out, you know, just NIL, I can't get to a Division II or III game fast enough. Not that they don't want money too, but at least they love the game and they're actual student athletes versus just some of the ones on the D1 level. Not all of them.
You know, it doesn't even have to be D2, D3. I enjoy going to other teams' games. Like I've been to an Iron Bowl in Auburn before. I've been to bring all my 680 The Fan buddies, Dan Matthews included. I drove everybody up in the RV up to Notre Dame when Georgia went up to play in South Bend. We went and did the whole weekend. We did a Cubs game on that Friday night. We did the Georgia Notre Dame game on Saturday. We hit the Falcons and the Bears, and then we beat a hurricane back because the hurricane was coming up. The same one that decimated Mexico Beach was coming back up, and then we beat it back to Atlanta, parked the RV, and the thing was swaying. I love going to those games. I went 2 years ago to watch Georgia play up in Knoxville on just a Saturday afternoon because I love college football, right? I mean, I drove from Atlanta up to Knoxville, and look, it's kind of refreshing not having a dog in the fight. You know, LSU, I think, was either off that weekend or we were playing later that night or something. And I just said, look, I'm going up for a game. And it was great, man. I was just, if you're a fan of sports and a fan, especially of college football, you can have just as much fun, even if it's not your team there.
In fact, it might be a little bit more fun sometimes.
Well, it's less
Because-
pressure. I know that.
Yeah.
And I came this close to going with a buddy of mine, and we almost went to the kick 6 game. God, I wish I'd have been there, because I would have been, it was like when I went to watch Joe Burrow play in the when Cincinnati came in to play Tennessee in the AFC Championship the divisional game 2 years ago. When I walked in with my LSU shirt on with all those Bengal fans, between them getting Jamar and getting Joe, man, they couldn't thank me enough. I didn't buy a beer that whole day. I mean, everybody was coming up, hey man, let's get your beer, buddy.
Well, they love the game.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, and I think the Sentinel moment in showing, and there's a lot of fans, I don't get it. They sit on their ass at a game and wait to hear the score of their big rival. And if they're trailing, they scream and holler and cheer. Again, I don't know. I love my school. I'm not worried about all that crap. But in 2020, the year of the virus, when evil forces were at work to try to take away sports, starting with college football, we learned, and I knew it already, and I think you did. I know you do. But we learned we need each other. Okay, you want everybody to lose every game? Maybe PBS or some high school station will start carrying your games, but you want everybody to be good. And Jake's right. You can make a case, and he did, and he's right. Top to bottom, the SEC stronger in baseball than it is in football, but that is why we love it, because everybody's trying to win.
A case can be made for that. And to quote the great Ben Franklin, if we don't hang together, certainly we will hang separately. When he was talking about the founding fathers and declaring independence from England, right? So that's the same thing with this. And look, I love it. I always cheer for the SEC, even though it might not be best in my team's best interest. Like I was sitting in there for the Tennessee-Stanford game the other day when I sent you all the pictures of me hanging out with the Auburn guys, that when I was sitting up there, I was cheering for Tennessee. Now, I knew Tennessee was going to be a tougher game for us because, Stanford pitched their ace. We wasn't going to see him, but Tennessee was going to be a tough game, but I still cheer for them. I will be honest, though. I will be honest. This is a show of honesty. There is one school, well, really one coach, that when I see that they're losing, I do crack a smile. The rest of you in my conference, I'm cheering for you, but there's one guy that I'm just telling you. You ask any LSU fan, I can't do it anymore, Rob. That is just can't. That team in crimson, I just cannot. Nothing.
Well,
nothing.
That being said, what about this? Can you cheer for the Vandy Whistler? I don't know where the guy's from, where he lives, but I know one thing. I saw a picture. He's got a big old whoop back greaser hairdo, and he just whistles and whistles and whistles. And what they need to do, someone needs to bring him out to the College World Series just to, if you want good seats around you, get him to show up and he'll clear the area out.
Somebody needs to bring him down to the bayou as well. We need to bring him.
Could you imagine him being, I don't know if he does. You know what the thing is about Vanderbilt football, sparse crowds they be, he probably is just as annoying there versus at a typical SEC stadium. It's too loud for people to notice him. All right, let's get back to some baseball. Listening to the game last night and watching it. I had to leave for a while to run a mission, and then went and ran, and then I came back, but I could hear it when I was out running. LSU, Wake Forest. Wake Forest, they were talking about, they have a pitching lab. Remember Butch Thompson talked about Auburn's going to have a pitching lab. And so Wake Forest is big into the pitching lab. What do you know about that? There's analytics. There's all kind of stuff people are using.
Yeah. Other than that, like about 3 years ago, they went over to this metrics. Look, there's like half the pro teams, the Major League Baseball teams, that believe in metrics. It's the money ball. It's Moneyball. It's basically making the whole game mathematics, which drives old baseball people absolutely crazy. Because like Brian Snicker, I love him as our manager of the Braves because he's a feel person. Yeah, they probably look at all the statistics. They know how to wear a line of people, but it's more of a gut. It's more of a feel. It's an old school thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, half of them are not that way anymore. It's like the guy that was up in Philly and that is now actually having success. I think it's one of the California teams, might be San Francisco. Gabe Kapler. Well, when he was at Philadelphia, when we would play him a lot, I mean, it was a train wreck. He was making these bizarre moves because the metrics said so. Now, didn't pass the smell test, didn't pass the eye test, but they were doing that. So I think what Wake did was they went over to that philosophy of baseball and pitching. Now, again, I don't know it well. I just know it because we've now faced them twice, and I'm picking up a little information on it. But I think that's what they did. Now they've improved immensely. And Wake Forest being the number 1 ranked team in America, I mean, they're doing something right. Whatever they're doing something right. But like I told my buddy, I was texting with him. In fact, I might have sent you and Doug Dean and Maury Gaston the text as well yesterday. I said, well, if LSU wins tonight, meaning last night, LSU wins last night, today when they wake up and this beautiful day, which you can see here in gorgeous Omaha with a low humidity and the heat hadn't come out yet, what you're going to realize from Wake Forest is they're going to wake up and realize they're Wake Forest, and they're going to wake up and realize on the other side is LSU. And you know, the fact that the best pitcher in college baseball, and who I think is probably going to be the number 1 pick, and if it's not him, it's going to be his teammate Dylan Cruz, that you know, that's going to set in, and no metrics can help with between the 6 inches between the ears, where, as you know, Rob, and you've said it numerous times, many battles are won or lost already before they're fought in the 6 inches between the ears of one of the combatants. And I think that's what you might see tonight.
Yeah, because you mentioned the Paul Skeens, if they'd have put him out there last night, they didn't need to. What's amazing, the real story, and what I love about having Ken Capps and Bo Carter on is, and our other great writers, journalists, you know, Bo teaches journalism, but Ken said to our intern, Billy Ray Valentine, William Halliday from the Auburn Plainsman, you know what the story is? Capricorn, yeah. He goes, you know what the story is? You go to Jeff Graba, the gymnastics coach at Auburn, and you say, all right, tell me about 2 or 3 gymnasts on the team behind Suni Lee that you think are going to come forward and step up their game for next year. He goes, that's the real story, and that's what we need. I'm going to tell you what, you look at these websites and the grammatical errors and the sentence structure and the long, endless run-on sentences. I mean, it's enough to make you cry. I used to get hit on the ruler on the knuckles, you know, great Catholic education, or picked up. We had a brother, John Michael, that taught us typing. The man was at least 8 feet tall, weighed about 400 pounds, and he wore those long black robe with the white collar, the LaSallian brothers. In typing, if you looked at the keys, he'd go, don't look at the keys, you boob. And if you looked at him again, he'd go, don't look at the keys, you jackass. He'd pick you up by the hair on the back of your neck, out of your chair, and type with your nose, if you know what I mean. I learned how to type.
And if you were like me at St. Francis in New Orleans for catechism school, I wasn't afraid of the 6'8" guy that could pick me up out of the chair. I was afraid of Sister Mary, who was 4'4" and wielded a yardstick like a ninja.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that's what I was worried about.
and that's how we learned how to type. I still indent 5 spaces to the right when I text people. I mean, it's stupid, but you're right. Look at the knuckles.
I don't know what's more worn out on me. These knuckles from those yardsticks, or these knees from being a catcher for 12 years. I don't know which joints have been more worn out.
Well, I'm telling you, you're right. And now, you know, they've got those foam pads for the catchers to wear when they're playing, when they can kneel down. But Frank, that's the thing about it. There's so much content. You name the website. And I was listening to Chuck Oliver's show, Southern Sports Today, which I like to listen to right after we go off the air. And it was fun having Dan Matthews on with us yesterday. You know, like Chuck says, the king of college football. And, you know, you got us 8 to 10 Monday through Saturday, and them 10 to 12 Central, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Monday through Friday. College football, yeah. And we love it with the baseball. Someone said, why don't y'all talk more about recruiting? Well, we do, but I like to bring the guests on that are covering those respective schools. But we do know this about recruiting. LSU is going to always, by default, have a class in the top 12, top 15 at the worst. Now, same thing really with a school like Auburn. or Alabama. I mean, Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State are 1, 2, and 3. Clemson was there. They've fallen off a little bit, but
that's why Harsin put y'all in the hole. He wasn't recruiting. I mean, how do you come down? How does Potato Boy come down and not realize that the lifeblood of the SEC is look, like we were talking about, I can't remember who else we were talking about with about a couple days ago. And by the way, Rob, I am the freshman pitcher who has come out this week and given you about 180 innings. I know people are tired of probably hearing my butt from Omaha, giving you a lot of good innings. But I will tell you, who on God's green earth wouldn't have thought that it's not the X's and O's? You can't do the X's and O's without the Jimmies and Joes. What was Harsin thinking? I mean, it just made no sense. Look, he already knew he was going into the disadvantage when you got, the Dark Lord that's in Tuscaloosa, who's can recruit 5-stars like they're nickels in his pocket. He had to come in and do that to forget that, or to overlook it, or to think it wasn't important, or to think that his schematics were that great. Man, that was criminal what he did to Auburn's football team, and we all talked about it. I sat with Doug Dean in Jordan-Hare for the LSU game. We knew it then, and it was like, well, how, it made no sense. So no, you're exactly right. LSU, shame on us if we can't get a top 5 or top 10 recruiting class. We do it every year. I mean, we don't have real competition, even though Tulane has had a great year last year and went out to the Rose Bowl and beat USC in an exciting game, which I was cheering for them for. Look, we're the 800-pound gorilla in the state. We can show up the state if we're doing good on our recruiting. And we're really good now going all around the country. So there's no reason. Same for Auburn, same for Alabama, same for Georgia. And look, let me tell you something. Shame on Texas A&M. We were kind of busting on Jimbo a little early when I joked that the worst rate of return is a Texas A&M booster who paid for that incredible NIL recruiting class, and they came out and wet the bed, right? Well, let me tell you something. All of our schools, Texas, Oklahoma, there's maybe with the exception of Vanderbilt and maybe Mississippi State. Other than that, there's no reason why you can't recruit. South Carolina should recruit. Tennessee, Kentucky. Kentucky, all I got to do is worry about Louisville and state of Kentucky. And they do have good athletes because they've got Louisville, right? There's no excuse for SEC teams not to be in the top 20. And look at Florida's train wreck of recruiting over the last couple
not
years.
now. Yeah, but now, Billy.
No, not now. I'm talking about last year, the year before,
Dan Mullen.
the year before that. For 3 years under the last year under Billy Napier, but you got to give him a pass because he was coming in late. But under those last 2 years of Mullen, they were lousy. They were like ranked 50, 60. Now they would come on, get talent in the end, but there's no reason why these types of schools are not being successful in recruiting. And Florida's come back, and so is Auburn. Y'all are recruiting really well right now. Freeze is out there beating the bushes. From what I've heard from my LSU guys, Freeze is probably the hardest working recruiter out there right now. I mean, you can tell me more than I can say, but I've heard he's out there beating the bushes.
Yeah, he is. He's got to. And you look at Florida, Dan Mullen he's from New Hampshire. Brian Harsin's from Idaho. And Brian Harsin thought he could outdevelop people. You can't. That's what they did at Boise. And, they beat Oklahoma in that bowl game. They would have those occasional wins like that, but they weren't doing that week in and week out 12 times a year. No, at least 8 conference games. That's the big difference.
And that wasn't his program, Rob. That was left over.
That was not.
That was left.
He was there for 7 years. The problem was he didn't understand the South and the Southern culture and the people down here. And, I remember, I met him a couple of times. I just said, man, you're in the right place, man, to be the coach, at Auburn. You love hunting and fishing. He goes, well, I love drag racing. I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway,
Lord.
If
you can't go into a Southern home as a head football coach and enjoy their greens and Hoppin' John and a nice big slab of
Hoppin' John.
You gotta get a nice big slab of ham and biscuits served at 5 o'clock in the evening. If you can't pull that off, brother, shame on you.
Yeah.
Hey, I love this. I love
yeah.
the story Danny Ford joked about when I was one of the big sponsors of the Atlanta Touchdown Club. When he came in and said about how he had to recruit this big old lineman out of Arkansas. And he goes, I went on over there and mama just was a cooking and a cooking and a cooking. And he goes, all of a sudden I looked down to see what we were eating, and it was pig's feet. And he goes, let me tell you something. There ain't nothing worse than a jelly congealed on a pig's foot put on your plate. And he goes, this is back. He goes, this is back when I was coaching with, I think it was Coach.
He was coaching Arkansas.
Yeah, but no, this is actually even before Arkansas. I think he was actually on Bryant's staff.
Okay.
I think, don't quote me, but he was, when he was recruiting, he goes, I had to figure out a way to get that pickles pig foot not in my stomach and not where they could find it. So he kind of quietly wrapped it up in a napkin. And he said he was in his old blue leisure suit and he stuck it in the pocket of the leisure suit. And that jelly grease started leaking through. And the dog kept giving him away because the dog kept coming over and smelling up.
Listen, let me just tell you something. Down here in the Mississippi Delta, you can go into a convenience store and get about anything. And at the Friendly Market here in Parkin, they've got pig's feet. But the big truth or dare, the double dog dare that I used to love to do at the War Eagle Supper Club in college, they had this giant jar about 2 feet tall of the clear jar with those pickled eggs in it.
Oh yeah, the real hot eggs.
Yeah, 2 or 3 in the morning. You'd be pretty liquored up and you'd dare somebody. I double dog dare you to eat one of those things. And let me say this: they'd be doubled up on the floor with a gut ache, and you know what? It was like giving childbirth to get rid of that. It was so bad. And I don't know who makes those things and why people like them, but people like them. But
I know where you can get them, the Piggly Wiggly. That's exactly what you get them. But I'll tell you funny. Do we need a break?
No, we're good. We got a minute.
I'll tell you a funny story. So we road trip, not for a football game to Auburn, but we came to watch Chuck Person and the round mound of rebound Charles Barkley play LSU. And our weekend on the road trip was we went to Auburn for a Friday night game.
Yep.
And then we went up to North Carolina, up to Chapel Hill
Sunday,
when we played Kenny Smith on Sunday.
Yep.
And all I can tell you is we stayed at the War Eagle Supper Club, and we were I was always in the bar business at LSU.
Yeah.
So we knew it well. But we knew y'all were going to probably shut down around 2 o'clock, like we would shut down our bars at Baton Rouge.
It didn't close.
Well, that's where I had my mistake, because I was timing our exit to where, at 2 o'clock, lights normally come on and you leave. The Supper Club, because of being a club, didn't close. And so my membership that I paid for at the door, which back then in $1982, which was $5, was like $50 today. But I was a proud member of the Supper Club.
Yeah, hold that thought, because I'll write you a recommendation letter until they tore it down. But we'll be right back with Frank Duffy. Stand by.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Speaking of all time, some of the grossest foods you've ever eaten, the pickled eggs. There used to be a school bus that would drive around campus to the fraternity houses and the dorms and pick people up and drive you out to the War Eagle Supper Club. And they had volleyball nets out there and a beach back in the back of it. And again, it was an exclusive club. Like you say, $2, $3, whatever. But man, I think a lot of people lost track of days of the week
no doubt.
and time. You just would go. It was like a casino. The air pumped in there.
Yeah.
It's always everybody's jacked up. The endorphins are being released. That was one of the greatest bars. And I would go home in 84 and 85 with cassette tapes, and people would say, "Who's this stupid rim band you keep talking about?" And at the REM, REM, the B-52s, they would come there and play at the War Eagle Supper Club. That's what you remember. Hell, I remember East End Ballroom in Memphis when we were in high school. The Police, U2.
Oh, yeah.
They would play. Billy Joel in the early 70s started playing at Lafayette's Music Room in Overton Square in Memphis. And I went to a concert of his April of 2016, 19,000 people packed. And he talked so much about his time in Memphis. But you never know the band that you're listening to, how good they are. And like, I love what you said about those neighborhood groceries in New Orleans, by Uzi's. I mean, that True South episode with John T. Edge. And I just cannot tell you enough about the job that they do, because they get it about the culture in the South, the people, black, white, Vietnamese, and the food and our love of sports and alcohol that pulls us together.
Well, I remember in Duffy's, one of my bars that I managed several bars, and then I owned my one at the end in Duffy's. But I remember I still have a return check that went through the system, and you used to get your checks manually back, and I held on to this. I said, this is gonna be worth something one day. I paid Better Than Ezra $125. John Griffin, Kevin Griffin, my old fraternity brother, him and his band, $125 to come in and play 4 hours one night. And of course, they went on to be big, in the 90s, right? And so you have these bands that come in and they get their starts because of the bars. And then you're right, all of the different local restaurants and stuff. But that's the fabric also of Louisiana. I could put you in a cab when you get to the airport in New Orleans, pay the cab driver $15 and tell him to drive in any direction. When the $15 runs out, you could get out and walk to a world-class restaurant, but it might be some dive in the back of some supermarket. It's crazy.
Yeah. But those are the best ones. Look, Frank, I hope Rhonda, hope we don't read about you, but I know she's ready to pull your head off. But
Jordan, I'm on my 22nd day in the RV out here at the College World Series running around. My wife reminded me this morning, you're on the 22nd day of your bucket list trip out here. She goes, you've talked to Rob Browne more this week than you've talked to me. And of course, what happens? John Hartwell doesn't on a segment. I'm now here another hour and a half. I told Rob I am his utility pitcher. I have given him more innings. I will see you on Monday, Rob. Hopefully before the final championship, when we have a shot at beating the Gators. I will see you then. I'm off tomorrow. I'm off Saturday because I like my stuff on the inside of the house, or in this case, the RV, not the outside. Yeah. Love y'all. Y'all have a great conversation. Talk to you later.
Frank, be careful. I'll talk to you later today. Appreciate it. Frank Duffy up there live from Omaha. Let's head over to Jordan Hill in right now, Athens, the classic city. And Jordan, I don't know, you've been in Athens for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And Auburn, we used to have the War Eagle Supper Club, but the bands came from Athens. And Athens still to this day it's a music city like Memphis is or Nashville. Not as big, but man, Frank, 22 days. He was heading to Yellowstone and got the emergency call back. Attention, Bengal 1, report to Omaha. And the economy of Omaha has gotten a huge boost with LSU being out there. And by the way, college football, SEC top to bottom. Jake Wimberly was on with us earlier from Jackson. Top to bottom, you could say SEC baseball top to bottom is better with SEC football. And I think about this pitching. 2 nights in a row, LSU's put someone out there. Who is this guy? And they've come through. And now the pitching coach for LSU is the new baseball coach at Georgia. And this guy was with the Minnesota Twins for 4 years, came back. He's been around the SEC, but Georgia is so dominant in football right now and getting a lot of questions from people. And they're saying, when Jordan Hill comes on, ask him, what does he think is going to happen down in Jacksonville when they do that construction work on the stadium? Okay. They're going to move the game like they did in 94 and 95. It didn't work out well. I think Florida won 52-0 2 years in a row or something. But do you think they'll go back to Jacksonville? And B, if not, who's going to push harder to take the game home and home, Georgia or Florida?
I mean, I think Georgia's going to push the hardest because Kirby's wanted it so bad. And, his comment has been he just can't get a Florida coach to agree with him. So that is, to me, going to be the window when they're working on the Jaguar Stadium. And, Rob, I don't know if you've seen the sort of the projections for the stadium. I mean, it's going to look incredible. It really kind of looked like SoFi out in L.A., the way they're kind of redoing it. But, I mean, I think that is going to be very interesting to see how that home and home goes. The projection I think is for that construction to be in 26 and 27, and they would play home and home. But I'm telling you now, I want to see how big of a fight there is for who's the first team to get to host, because I bet you there will be kind of a back and forth of, they may try to go back. I don't remember when I think the last one may have been in Athens because Spurrier put 52 on Georgia, and an opponent had never scored over 50 on Georgia in Athens. But I mean, that's going to be the window. I think that those games will be highly celebrated, being in Gainesville and Athens, getting a chance to go to the Swamp, Florida fans getting a chance to come to Sanford Stadium. Yeah. I still am of the mindset that ultimately it's going to stay in Jacksonville because of the money. I think the city of Jacksonville is going to make it way too enticing for both schools to turn that down. But if things go really, really well for those games when they're on campus, maybe the universities do kind of look inward and say, okay, what's best? The money we can take in, which is going to, be a big driving factor, a big determining factor, or the chance to play these games on campuses.
Do you know what the local economic impact is in Gainesville and in Athens, or at least in Athens? And then what will the city of Jacksonville offer? Because I've never heard Dallas come up to Oklahoma and Texas. Here's what we offer. I just know that Oklahoma and Texas fans love going because of the state fair, turkey legs, the lady guessing people's weight, and funnel cakes.
Yeah, I don't know financially off the top of my head what those numbers are. I do know there's an agreement with Jacksonville because that's a big part of the driving factor of why this game hasn't been moved before. Because I think if Kirby would have had his way, one of his first, like a president coming into office, one of his initiatives early on would have probably been to move that game because of the recruiting value of it, being able to get guys there, have that game on campus, get another home game every other year. Because, every other year they wind up having one less home game because you've got that neutral site. So I know that Jacksonville makes it really enticing. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but, just like anything, just like with the conference staying put with its current 8-game schedule to adding Texas and Oklahoma to leaving CBS, it's all about money. And I get why that is. But that's a driving factor when it comes to Jacksonville still being a part of the conversation. And like I said a few minutes ago, why I'm still of the belief that I'll believe it when I see it when it comes to that game permanently leaving Jacksonville. It does look like there will be a 2-year window where it won't be played there because of construction on the stadium. But I still think that game is going to be in Jacksonville until I'm told otherwise.
Well, what they need to do, the city of Jacksonville, to keep those two teams there is have the battle of the bands. And I'm talking legendary Leonard Skinnard from Jacksonville and 38 Special. That would be kind of a cool thing, but it is a great atmosphere down there. And I know there are tons of Georgia fans, Jordan, there in Jacksonville. And Florida, obviously, it's an hour and a half from Gainesville. But, and I don't want to sound like a hypocrite because, why didn't you want the Auburn-Alabama game to stay in Birmingham? Well, that was obvious. When the people parking your cars and selling your programs and selling your food are all wearing Alabama hats and there's a statue of Coach Bryant out in front of the stadium, that ain't really a neutral site. But and also it was the best thing to ever happen to both Auburn and Alabama for season tickets and growth of their programs. Let's head back over to Athens. I saw a great interview with it was Chris Domino and Nick Cellini on their show on 680 with Kirby Smart. It was a couple of months ago. They said Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall, but when they built Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall in 87, did they have that? They just recently got the indoor football facility. That's what they call the House of Pain, Billy and Otis Porter Payne. I thought he does seem relaxed. You're around Kirby Smart. Again, I don't know him. He's a South Georgia guy from Bainbridge. I like the way he answers questions. You get to talk to him a lot. Do you feel like he's pretty much like, hey, we don't know who the quarterback is, and I know as much practice as y'all get to see, how would you know more than me? I like that was a pretty funny answer.
Yeah, he can be pretty good. I think especially on some of those sit-down, opportunities to talk. And I think trying to remember the show that's out there in Birmingham. It was like Happy Hour or Next Round or whatever. He was on there after that Pro-Am and was really, about
Rick and Bubba show. Rick and Bubba.
Right. And he was just about as laid back as I've ever seen.
Yes.
I think it kind of just depends really more so on the topic. And if he's just kind of shooting the breeze with people doing radio and talking more off the team, he can be really relaxed. And, I think, I've talked to a few people about this, that he was on a podcast 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point called The Growth Project. And the podcast is by a sports psychologist who works at Georgia and was very as insightful as I think I've ever heard Kirby over a period of 30, 40 minutes. Talked about, his childhood, talked about determining when he wanted to coach. He said he really had no idea he was going to coach until he got cut during spring mini camp with the Colts. And he said, drove back to Athens, got back at like 3 a.m, looking through the newspaper, and my name is in there from where I got cut. And, it's like, all right, well, what's next? And he can be really insightful. And I think it depends on who's asking him the question, but it also kind of depends on where the question is sort of centered and geared. But he can be really insightful. And obviously, just from their success, that he's a very smart X's and O's coach. And he also sort of understands the best way to motivate players. That was a big part of that podcast, was finding ways to motivate guys and get everybody on the same page and get them making plays.
Yeah, and I remember him, that interview I watched, and I watched a bunch of them, which I think helps us. And what you and I both do is the more you see people interviewed, how they answer questions, and the more you know about them, the more I guess you can form better questions. But he said when he was a defensive back at Georgia, he was the son of a coach at Bainbridge High School down in South Georgia. He goes, I weighed 175 pounds. Now, if you're not 195 or above and long and lean, you don't really get on the field. But, there are some exceptions when you see these guys that have just blazing speed. But he really seems to, when you watch him in the pregame warmups, he goes up and he puts his hand on every player when they're stretching or whatever and says something to them. He's a fiery guy. And I'm, for one, anytime someone takes a mic or a camera and records the pregame talk or whatever, and if anyone dares to criticize them, that's none of their damn business. I've been on the sidelines, in college. I can remember this, working for TV. You name the network, we would get paid like $100 a day. The guy holding the parabola, right next to the coach, and they do something stupid, and you hear a God bless America. That ain't really what they're saying. That's not fair when people say, I can't believe he talked like that on TV. It's an intense game, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And that does crack me up when, Kirby in a post game a few years ago dropped an F-bomb, and there were a lot of, and at the time I was still in Auburn. So I heard a lot of Auburn fans being like, I can't believe he said
Oh,
that.
yeah. I can't believe.
Yeah. Those guys are ministers out there walking that field. Right?
Yes.
And it is funny to me. What was funny last year, like the first quarter of the TCU game, somebody leaked audio, and it wound up not being from that night. But at first we thought it was. Yeah. And we got the audio, and we're all going, oh my God, Kirby's ready to kill these, this TCU team. It wasn't from that game. It was from earlier in the season, I believe. But Yeah, it's always funny the reaction to that stuff because it's just par for the course. And some coaches are different. Some guys aren't gonna. Mark Richt, I don't think was doing that.
No, I know.
But everybody's different. Everyone's approach is gonna be different, and for some people that works, and maybe for a different coach, if it's talking to certain players, that may not have that same effect. But yeah, it is kind of funny when people react and are surprised by that because nothing like that has ever caught me off guard, especially when it comes to like a pregame speech.
Yeah, and I don't think microphones. A friend of mine that was a starting in this year right tackle for Auburn in the 2002 Auburn-Florida game in the Swamp. He jumped off sides. It was late in the game, critical point in the Swamp, national TV, and Hugh Nall, Auburn's offensive line coach, an intense guy, played for Georgia, called him over there to the sidelines, and he grabbed my friend's teammate, and I'm not going to name him, by the face mask, and he starts just, and I'm like, well, God, it was you that was offsides. Did you say something to Coach Nall? He goes, hell no. He goes, I paid for it later. But that was it was like whoever he could get a hold of first, making a point, about doing it right. But, when people take recorders into private deals and meetings and practice, whatever. Yeah, that's ridiculous. I love the enthusiasm. And you watch the summer workouts. I don't know, they call them captain's workouts or whatever. And now, okay, we hear Dylan Raiola he's been in high school in Texas and then Arizona. Now he's moving to Buford High School. And I just got a text from, wow, this is hard to believe. Otis Campbell sent this from Mount Airy, North Carolina, said, I've been told that Georgia has offered 11 players on that Buford team what they call a blanket scholarship. Is it that good? Talk about what's going on at Buford High School. And is the current quarterback been told about Dylan Raiola moving in? Kind of like that movie, Clash of the Titans over there?
Right. It's been confirmed that Dylan Raiola is moving to Buford. Part of it, there was a little bit of a holdup because he had switched high schools out in Arizona, and he was going to miss 5 games. Like, there was no way to get around that. So I think they decided, look, we're just going to go ahead and move to Georgia. Buford's always been a power in the state of Georgia, and yeah, they are loaded. This team, we were talking about this with some of the other writers yesterday. It'd be fun to watch that Buford team play like an IMG Academy. And they do have some pretty good games on their schedule. I think they play St. Francis early in the year.
Yeah.
A few other marquee games. And they've got to be a favorite in their classification to win the championship. But, yeah, this really might wind up helping Georgia. There's a few guys that they're going after really in this 2024 class. I think the biggest one's KJ Bolden, who's a 5-star safety. They seem to really, really like where they are with him. And for a lot of us, we expect him to ultimately commit to Georgia. It's just sort of a matter of when. But a few other guys too. Edric Houston, defensive lineman, Ohio State is after him really, really hard. Several other guys, and several guys past the 2024 class, 2025, 2026. I know a couple weeks ago they offered 2 different Buford guys that are a little bit younger. But yeah, Buford has always been one of the top programs in the state. I mean, won countless championships and been right there for several others. So it makes sense to me why he's going to Buford. Do feel for whatever quarterback was already there, because he's going to have his hands full. I mean, I'm sure that they're not just going to give Dylan the job, especially moving in at this point in the year. But they're going to be loaded. And like I tweeted when it was announced, I know a lot of Georgia fans on Friday nights are going to be up in Buford seeing what this quarterback has to offer.
Yeah. Here's a question from Dennis McLeod, Palatka, Florida. Says, I'm a dog, live down here among the Gators. How are we doing in the state of Florida in recruiting this year? Billy Napier is coming up in Georgia in our own backyard. How are we counterpunching that one? Good one from that's a good question there from Dennis McLeod.
I think the biggest thing is that Georgia can recruit nationally to the point where, like, Florida really has gotten momentum. You can't just, shake off what Billy Napier and that staff has done. They've done a really good job over the last couple of weeks. But Georgia does such a good job of recruiting nationally that they don't necessarily have to say, well, now we got to go into Florida and get some guys. It's always funny to me, and especially when I was at Auburn, what I always enjoyed when I would talk to my dad, who's a huge Georgia fan, about Auburn, he would always say, why does Auburn have so many Georgia guys? And I'd say, Dad, they can't sign everybody. They can't sign everybody in the state of Georgia. There's going to be some, and that's what a lot of that is. Georgia's going to pick the top guys out of the state, or go after at least the top guys. But there's going to be a lot of guys that go elsewhere. And there was a defensive tackle earlier this week that did pick Florida that Georgia, I think, was after.
Yes.
I don't know if they kind of turned it on late, but weren't able to get him. But we're having this conversation. Georgia is the number one class in the country. I think they're up to 20, maybe 21 commits now. There's talk about them potentially having the class with the highest point total in the modern era of recruiting coverage. So about a counterpunch or having to go into Florida, I don't know if that's necessarily what they need to do or where they'll focus. It comes down to Georgia. With the success they've had, they don't really have to just stay in Georgia or stay in Florida. They've recruited nationally so well, and back-to-back championships. And the success they've gotten. I don't think they're going to look at what Billy and those guys in Gainesville have done and say, all right, we've got to do something to sort of counteract that.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. And you look at recruiting, and Auburn's starting to get back in, going after some guys and trying to get some of these 4 and 5 stars that are committed to Georgia and committed to Alabama. And your friend that just came up covering Auburn, who's now with you at 24/7 Sports, have you had a chance to talk to him about, like, wow, what's it like to have stories about serious recruiting battles? Because, everybody, when you get a commitment nowadays, instantly you read it and you're like, oh, this guy, he's the greatest 2-star, the greatest 3-star ever. It's unreal. But Jason Caldwell, y'all get out on the ground. You go see these games. And like Buford High School, I was listening to Chuck Oliver and Dan Matthews yesterday, Southern Sports Today, and Dan was on with us yesterday. $50 million athletic facilities there at Buford High School. I thought Richardson, Texas, putting $63 million into a high school stadium was a big deal. I mean, how far are they willing to go there? 6.5 million people, 22 counties in metro Atlanta, before half the state's Atlanta. But there's endless supply. This is a public school. We got to remember, not a private school.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always so hard to kind of wrap your head around because, you look at it and, when you look at athletics tied in with education, even me, I'm a sports writer, but it's like, is that what we're best served, using the money for? I think about when I was in Alabama and Central Phoenix City built their, indoor. And then what's so funny about all this, Buford, Central Phoenix City, Hoover, Thompson, as soon as you build one, someone's about to up it. I think Lowndes County is either finishing off or just finished a huge indoor. So it's just one of those things. I get that they make use of it, especially at programs like that. But as soon as you got a state-of-the-art one that's the best, you might as well be watching the clock because it's going to very quickly be replaced. Someone else is going to up what you just did.
Yeah, it's like you almost want to wait 6 or 8 months after you open your new football-only facility to officially open it, and then you've got to start remodeling and adding on to it. Who would have thought when they built the Georgia Dome and it opened for the 94 SEC championship game, Florida and Alabama, that 23 years later in 2017, they'd be opening up Mercedes-Benz Stadium right next door. That's how obsolete these things become. But the difference in the pros is how new and modern ours is. And in college is the infrastructure, the core was built 117 years ago or whatever, and you just build onto it. It's such a difference in the way we look at facilities in college and in pros. Last question, and then I want you to tag out, let people know how they can follow you. One rivalry you can't live without if you're a Georgia fan, and nobody's done a better job of explaining this about how Georgia fans are, because in the South, talk about that real quick and then tag out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to say Georgia, Florida, but like I've mentioned on the show before, if you're from West Georgia, it's Georgia, Auburn. North Georgia, like me, a lot of people love Georgia, Tennessee. Go to the East, that's sure there's a lot of Georgia, South Carolina, and then out of the conference, Georgia, Clemson. So I think the SEC will do the right thing by keeping at least Georgia, Florida, Georgia, Auburn, and hoping we still see a lot of Georgia, Tennessee, because that's been a very interesting one. But yeah, Rob, I appreciate you having me on. Dogs247.com for everybody who's listening, at Jordan Davis Hill on Twitter, at Dogs247 on Twitter. So we are not that far away from SEC Media Days, as crazy as that is. So trying to enjoy what's left of this summer, because once we get to Media Days, man, it is on.
Yeah, and what's amazing is you're already working as hard as you are, and everybody we have on here, on our guests, it is amazing, but we're looking forward to it. Hey, most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world, folks. Never miss an opportunity to help somebody out and thank the people who help you. Until then, have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. We are out of here.